God owns everything. That's Psalm 24. God owns everything. Time, talent, treasure. And the parable of the talents confirms that God doesn't want us to give back to what He's entrusted to us. He wants more.
Today on First Person, we'll hear from an experienced Christian businessman, the former CEO of the ServiceMaster Company. Bill Pollard will talk about navigating the choices we all face in life. Welcome to this week's conversation. I'm Wayne Shepherd. I'll introduce today's guest in just a moment. Thanks for your feedback on our recent interviews. We're able to meet such interesting people each week and enjoy bringing you their stories to you. Anytime you'd like to leave a comment on what you hear, you can visit our Facebook page for that purpose. We're found at facebook.com/firstpersoninterview. Our website is also a great resource. You can copy the link to any program and share it with someone else you think might enjoy listening. Just go to firstpersoninterview.com. Bill Pollard has distinguished himself both as a leader in business and as a dedicated Christ follower who sees no distinction between the two in life. His recent book, The Tides of Life, shares some of the lessons he's learned and wants to pass on to a new generation of leaders. Bill came to our studio recently to talk about those lessons.
Well, Wayne, I love to sail. And, when you're sailing, you have to deal with forces that are not in your control, but they make the difference of whether you go forward or not. The wind is probably the biggest force. But when you're sailing on the ocean, the tides are also very important as part of understanding, especially when you're going in and out of harbors. So I think that typifies a lot about life, certainly my life, that there were tides in my life and are still that affected the choices I could make that were really out of my control. But I'm thankful that as part of my faith, I realized there was someone who was in control.
Our mutual friend Don Cole used to teach that the 23rd Psalm could not have been written by a young man. It had to be written by an older man. And a book like yours has to be written by someone who's been through a few seasons of life.
Yes, and when I started out, Wayne, it was a book I was going to just write for my grandchildren. And then as I got into writing some of my experiences in life, I realized that tripped into things like leadership principles, principles of planning in life and in organizational behavior, and also authority. When I discussed the whole question of authority, we have issues of authority in an organization, which got involved in the role of a board of directors. So I dripped into some other subject as I was writing this for my grandchildren.
Well, we are richer for it, believe me. I do want to go back to the beginning and get some of the early part of your life, but just talk about what it is like to write about your life looking back over so many years and given the perspective that comes. I know there have been hard seasons and joyful seasons too, but what's that like?
Well, for me, writing is a chore. It doesn't come easily for me. But the times of reflection, I have, on this book, those times spanned 3 years. And what I did is use some of the talks I gave at ServiceMaster and also some of the discussions I had with my wife about our joint life together. We just celebrated 55 years of marriage. And then reflected on those as to what were the principles, how were those decisions made, and what were the lessons I learned, what were the mistakes I made. So there was a lot of reflection in the writing.
Mm-hmm. But your grandchildren still benefited from the book, even though it was broadened out to everyone, right?
Absolutely, yeah. They obviously all have a copy. I still have a grandchild who's in third grade, so he doesn't fully appreciate everything in the book.
He will.
But
or she will.
Most of my grandchildren are either, they're almost all in college or past college, and some of them have been married. So one of the thrills in life is to see them come back and give some appreciation or understanding. Yeah. But another thrill is just to see people that I've had a contact with in life, and this is an example, Wayne, of just last night. A person came to the door, knocked on my front door, and here's a fellow who was in politics in our county here that I had gotten to know, and I'd sent him a copy of the book. And he's been just studying it for the last 3 months. And he came over. He wanted to come over and talk to me and thank me. And so it's those kinds of things that are very rewarding.
Little that goes a long ways, doesn't it?
Yeah, it sure does.
Yeah. All right. Well, take me back. You grew up in a Christian home?
I did. I had the great privilege of having Christian parents, and that was, as I look back, especially on it, it was very important for me.
Your father died when he was very young. You were how old?
Well, he died when he was 60, and I was 18 in my freshman year in college.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Seems very young to me to die at 60, doesn't it?
Well, he had a heart attack when he was 54, and at that time, I, of course, was much younger, and from that time on, he was very careful about his life, but things changed in our home, and things changed in his business, so that he couldn't. He was a sales rep for manufacturing companies, did a lot of traveling, but he couldn't do the traveling after that. And
did it change him?
He was more sober, but he was still active in coming to my athletic events, and we still had great talks. But he never thought I would make much of a lawyer. I was interested in becoming a lawyer because I didn't read enough. I remember those long lectures I got.
He thought you should have been more of a reader?
Right. And I also remember during those years after his first heart attack, my mother was in a real protection mode for his health. So as I was growing up as somewhat of a rambunctious teenager, I was always concerned that the things I got involved in might cause him to have extra stress. So
what was your relationship like with your father?
Well, one of great respect, and one of I could always talk to him about subjects. But I think the respect, and I revered my father.
Bill, when did your faith become yours and not your parents'?
Well, it was a time when I was 8 years old, and we had just had a Sunday dinner with a local preacher, and the talk was about the second coming of the Lord around the table. And that evening, my mother decided she was not going to church and was going to stay home, and I stayed home that night, and I started peppering her with questions because I had a fear that I might wake up one morning and my parents would be gone and I'd be left. And it was then that she read a number of the passages familiar to me. I had memorized them in Sunday school, but then she turned to one in Galatians 3:26, "For ye are all children of God by faith in Christ Jesus." And it was a simple step of faith that I had to take, and I did so at my mother's knee. But, of course, as you know, Wayne, for me and on our walk of faith, that was just the beginning.
Yeah. It takes a while.
It does.
To really come to grips with it and fully understand, and maybe in a sense we never do.
Yeah.
But it's by faith.
Yeah.
Through grace by faith. Did you ever doubt afterwards? Did you
Yes.
ever go through a crisis time?
I never recall a real crisis time of doubting. I did have times, especially in my teenage years, where I refer to it as kicking against the bricks. The rules, we have fairly strict rules in our household. The rules, quote, of our faith, and what I was experiencing was freedom that my friends had, and and also the inconsistency of what I saw as inconsistency of the application of the rules in a Christian environment.
And yet you chose to go to a Christian college, Wheaton College. Did you have that sorted out by the time you went to college, or were you still kicking the bricks? You had a lot of bricks to kick there.
Yeah, right. I had most of it sorted out, and I was determined. I wanted to go to Wheaton and play football, and that was. And Harv Krauser, who was the athletic director there, was very instrumental in encouraging and recruiting me to Wheaton. But as I say in the book, I'm not a good tester of standard tests. I don't get good grades, and I was unsure whether Wheaton was going to accept me until late August, just before football camp started.
Some things don't change, do they?
Right.
And a lot of anxiety among students today.
Right.
You met your wife there at Wheaton. Those must have been great years for you.
Great years, they were, and I appreciate my friendships that came out of Wheaton.
They've been lifelong, haven't they?
They have been lifelong. It's one of the I've always encouraged people when you come to Wheaton, you learn, but the greatest benefit for me and many of our alumni was what happens afterwards with the friendships you have in various places of the world, really. Mm-hmm.
But despite your father's doubts, you went on to law school. I
did, and that was the encouragement of my professor, Dr. Volkman, who was a lawyer and accountant in the business department. And I was already married by the end of our junior year, so I had to think about supporting a family, and I had a small painting business and going to law school, but the law school admitted me and gave me a scholarship of all things. So my total cost to go to Northwestern Law School was $300.
Is that right?
So
put a few zeros on that today.
Yes, that's right. That's right. So I and it was a very, very important time in my life because most of the way law is taught in many of the law schools, and certainly at Northwestern, was through the Socratic method. So it forced me to think about issues of life, issues in the law, issues in my faith. And it was a real disciplining time for my mind.
We'll continue today's conversation with businessman Bill Pollard, the author of The Tides of Life, coming up in a moment. Next time, the story of Mission Aviation Fellowship is told by its president, John Boyd.
The profoundness of what MAF is. We serve the most isolated people in communities that don't have access to basic human needs like medical attention and doctors and medicines, and more than that, the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ.
We'll get the full story behind Mission Aviation Fellowship as you meet John Boyd next time on First Person. My guest on First Person today is Bill Pollard. He is the author of the new book, The Tides of Life, Learning to Lead and Serve as You Navigate the Currents of Life. And I've read the book through a couple of times, Bill. Really appreciate the book.
And
thank you for the lessons. There are many lessons here for just about any age. You mentioned the grandkids, and you're starting out to write for them, but there's something here for all of us, I feel. Why not just kind of coast at this stage of your life? You've had a successful career. A couple of stints with Service Master at the helm there and chairman of the board of Wheaton College and so many other accomplishments. Why not just sort of sit back and coast a little bit?
Well, I have a poem near the end of the book, which is, in the end is my beginning and in the beginning is my end. And we normally think of that in the latter statement of that phrase, in the beginning is my end. And there's certainly a big beginning and end of life. But as I look at the challenge today of what I have experienced in my life, and that is integrating the claims of my faith with the demands of my work, and how today there's more and more people that are interested in that whole subject. That's a subject that to me is important for me to continue to encourage, support, either in speaking or in other ways. So I have an outlet to do that, and I see responses. Even today, as before we had this interview, as you know, I had a talk in Chicago on that. But so that's one thing. And the other thing is some lessons I learned from Peter Drucker, and he was a great influence in my life.
He's not just someone you read. You knew him, right?
Yeah, he was a friend and a mentor. And one of his driving principles, he didn't write much about it, was that the corporation that served customers, made money, created wealth, could also be a moral community for the development of human character. And I really think corporate America needs that message today.
Pretty radical thinking, and it probably doesn't permeate business schools today, does it?
No, not much, hardly at all. And it is, I think, as you look at the various organizations in life that affect society, the corporate organization, the business or corporate organization, has a big impact on society. And people are spending most of their waking days in their work environment. So how is it cultivating that person in not only what they're doing, but the person they're becoming?
Yeah. This dichotomy between work and faith, I mean, I know you're asked this question a lot, but you seem to have really come to grips with that. I mean, you worked at the corporate level at, Fortune 500 companies, and you seem to be on top of that.
Well, I don't know if I'm ever on top of it.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
But it is something that I was introduced to in a major way when I came to ServiceMaster. And frankly, Wayne, before that time, on this issue of faith and work, I was pretty much of a bifurcated person. Church on Sunday, work on Monday.
So who led you out of that?
It was really in the ServiceMaster environment. Now, I had a transition in life before then. I practiced law for 10 years, and then I came to Wheaton College and served there in the administration and on the faculty under Dr. Armerding for about 4.5 years. And that was a wonderful community, but it was an entire Christian community. So I didn't feel the tension I was in.
You weren't tested there, were you?
But in the marketplace, when I was recruited to join ServiceMaster in 1977, that was a whole other environment. And my predecessor, starting with Marion Wade, and Marion used to just put it very simply. He said, I can't leave God in the pew on Sunday. I have to bring him to work on Monday.
Just can't do it.
Can't do it. And that infiltrated the whole development of that company. And Ken Hansen and Ken Westner, my predecessors, really, really developed it. And it was there in our objectives to honor God in all we do, to help people develop, to pursue excellence, and to grow profitably. And those first two objectives were end goals. The second two were means goals. And I then was able to develop this whole understanding that in life there are good means goals that have no eternal purpose. And the end goals have eternal purpose, but their means goals are essential.
Yeah.
And so that's part of the great learning that I experienced in ServiceMaster.
You mentioned those objectives. Publicly traded company, you get pushback on that?
Oh, yeah. We got pushback all the time. Sometimes we got pushback as we were recruiting people. We got pushback from, I can remember every time I would make a presentation on Wall Street and look at the audience, I'd see somebody sitting out there with a furrowed brow. And I would introduce the question. I'd say, I bet you somebody out there is wondering what is the relationship between God and profit. And I want to tell you, in ServiceMaster, the way we view it is that people, that's what makes the two work. And it's people created in the image and likeness of God with their own dignity and worth and fingerprint of potential. And our responsibility is to have them work productively and effectively, but also to become better people.
Yeah. Plus, it's hard to argue with success.
Right.
ServiceMaster was very successful.
Well, very successful.
With those objectives.
Very successful. Wayne, I would only say that we were successful. Those objectives were very important and confirmed what, again, Drucker said, people work for a cause, not just a living. But at the same time, success wasn't automatic.
Yeah, I
we had to
understand.
work
A lot of hard work involved, too.
Right.
Yeah, sure. I cannot take that away from you. You've mentioned Peter Drucker, Ken Hansen, Marion Wade, mentors, right?
Yes.
Talk about mentoring.
I found both with them and in my life when people have asked me to mentor, it's best done when the situation occurs for it. If mentoring is overstructured, we're going to meet every Monday morning to mentor or once a month to mentor.
I'm so glad to hear you say that.
It becomes a structure. It doesn't become meaningful. So
right.
These people at times intervened in my life, or I intervened in their life, asking questions. I'll never forget. I'll give you an example of this. A Ken Hansen example. When I first came to Service Master, I had the staff side of the business basically reporting to me, and then they started to give me some of the operating responsibilities. And the franchise group was one of those. And I remember Ken coming in the office saying, "Bill, why do our franchisees still pay us fees?" I said, "Oh, Ken, look at what we're doing for them." And I gave a long list of things that we were doing for them. And he looked at me and he said, "You still don't understand the business." And he turned around and walked out of my office. So I ran after him. I said, "Get back in my office and tell me what I need to understand." And he came back and looked me right in the eye, and he said, "Bill, they continue to pay the fee because they want to belong. And don't you ever forget it. You've got to keep an environment of a desire to belong to something bigger and more successful."
So he held you accountable.
Yep.
And that's part of mentoring,
That's
isn't it?
exactly right.
To hold people accountable?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Huh. Is there a verse? A lot of people have a life verse. I don't know if you have a life verse, but is there a verse of Scripture at this time that just means a lot to you, Bill?
The verse that led me to the Lord has always meant a lot to me in Galatians 3:26. But really, I think the combination of Psalm 24 and the parable of the talents, I thought a lot about that, and that really is the reminder that God owns everything. That's Psalm 24. God owns everything: time, talent, treasure. And the parable of the talents confirms that God doesn't want us to give back to what He's entrusted to us. He wants more, which is being productive. It's just a constant reminder as I'm looking at what I've been given in the way of resources or time, and I need to continue to invest those for a return for God. And so it's not a guilty conscience. It's just a constant reminder, which is stimulating, in fact, for me.
You see yourself as a steward.
Yeah, exactly. It's the principle of stewardship.
I admire how Bill Pollard has lived for Christ in the marketplace without compromise and is pointing the way for those who follow in this generation. Bill's book is titled The Tides of Life, Learning to Lead and Serve as You Navigate the Currents of Life. You'll find links to this book and more information at our website, firstpersoninterview.com. Also online, you'll find this and past interviews archived for listening anytime it's convenient. One idea is to copy the link for First Person and pass it on to others you think would benefit from hearing what you've heard today. That's firstpersoninterview.com. And if you'd like to comment on today's interview, please go to facebook.com/firstpersoninterview. That's facebook.com/firstpersoninterview. Next week, our guest will be the President and CEO of Mission Aviation Fellowship. We'll talk with John Boyd. Now, with thanks to my friend and producer Joe Carlson, I'm Wayne Shepherd. Join us again for First Person.